Well, I am now being joined by Joy John, Global Affairs Analyst from Bellcrest Institute, Washington, D.C. Let's discuss the gun violence issue in the United States. Not a better person to talk about this than someone who is right there. What are the key factors contributing to the alarming rate of mass shootings in the U.S.? You heard about the story earlier, about the children's party, and there's been several. The data is alarming. So how can these be addressed? Plus, I'm asking that because a lot of people would say, is it related to mental issues? How do you relate, and why is it on the increase or too often?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Olujay. This is such an important conversation, and when these mass shootings, tragedies happen, they shake our communities to the core. And there's never one single cause here. Here in the U.S., there are more guns per person than anywhere else, and sometimes dangerous individuals, fall through gaps in the system. Apart from the recent tragedy there you just talked about in Stockton, there were several fatalities recorded, especially on Thanksgiving Day. One of which was a deputy in Louisiana who was fatally shot by his own younger brother. Incidents like this, of course, remind us of how easy it is to access, firearms. And you talk about stress, personal conflict, and all that. So they all have devastating consequences. I think for me, the practical way forward, I would say, is better support for mental health, stronger consequences for illegal possession, and I think communities willing to speak up, and look out for each other. If we say we want a safer neighborhoods and a justice system that serves the people, I think we must use our voices, our votes, of course, and all lawful means to push for reforms.
Now, on the backdrop of what you've said, the Trump administration rather believes that everyone should own a gun. Now, how does, easy accessibility to gun in protection, so he says, how does that also contribute to the rise in, these cases?
So yes, it does play a key role. We're talking, there are also gun shows where people can go in and purchase firearms. But, again, the alarming numbers you just read in the broadcast remind us that there's always room to strengthen our protections for, our communities and families. I think that it's because they're so accessible, anyone can get a gun, and most times, like I said earlier, they fall through the cracks. The background check, they slip through, or it's not done. And so that's a problem that the lawmakers should have to go to the drawing board and look at.
Right. So how does the U.S. gun homicide rate compare to other high-income countries, and what does this reveal about the country's gun policies? It seems like there are loopholes that needs to be addressed.
So when you compare, and I really wouldn't hate to do this, but when you compare the U.S. to other, nations, other wealthy nations in the West, the numbers are striking. And there was a study in 2019 that found that, overall, the fire deaths was about 11 times higher than any other, other high-income countries. And the same study reported that firearm homicide rate was about 25 times higher. And these numbers are unsettling. And just remind us again that, it's about time that we begin to strengthen our laws and just making sure that our laws work as intended to keep people safe.
So what are these strengths and weaknesses of the Second Amendment, and how does it impact gun regulation efforts, since we're talking about, the laws here? Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can. So the Second Amendment is a foundational part of the U.S. Constitution, and it's a very important right for many Americans. At the same time, Olujay, today's firearms and social environment are different, very different from the 18th century, and that means that lawmakers must carefully craft regulations without infringing on constitutional rights. And I think that even as we all those who advocate for possessing guns, they fall on the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment does not prevent reasonable regulations on firearms. It just simply guides on how we balance individual rights and how to keep the community safe. Even the courts. The courts have also consistently held that the government can enforce rules like background checks, permits, licensing, and restrictions for high-risk individuals, as long as the laws do not take away the fundamental right to bear arms.
So how effective are background checks in preventing gun violence, and what, loopholes need to be addressed, especially with regards, background checks?
So very important. Background checks are, I would say, an effective tool for keeping guns out of the wrong hands and out of those who would abuse the privilege, especially when it's paired with permit requirements. For you to carry a gun, I believe anywhere in the world, you have to have a permit, by law. But there are still areas, like I said earlier, private sales, gun shows, where checks are not always required. So I think by closing these gaps or loopholes and encouraging safe storage, people is keeping their guns safe at home and cocked. Safely put away, we can better protect people without infringing on responsible ownership. Because it's getting to a point where people feel scared to even go into homes because they're not sure if kids can reach out to the guns and how accessible they are. So it's that bad.
So I'm going to bring in the gun industry here. How does the United States gun industry lobbying influence, how does it influence gun regulation policies, and what can be done to address that? Because we can't talk about this issue without talking about the gun industry in the United States. They play a role.
Absolutely. And I think it's all about finding a balance, balancing gun rights with public safety. And that means respecting the Second Amendment, again, while making sure that communities are safe. I think it's also about thoughtful policies, strong community involvement, and responsible use. A lot of people are just so very free with the trigger, just easy to pull the trigger. We've seen road rages that have led to fatalities. So I think when local community leaders, elected leaders, and of course the citizens work together, I think we can protect lives without taking away freedom. And I think that protecting gun rights while keeping communities safe requires, I would say, a nod from the Trump administration. I know that the NRA, is a big sponsor in most circles. I wouldn't want to delve into that, but I think that the Trump administration or the U.S. government as a whole has to look in and has to be willing to support the changes needed to address the rising numbers of gun violence.
Again, what are the most promising strategies for reducing gun violence in the U.S.? I'm asking that again so you can resound it. Plus, how can they be implemented? Also, how can the U.S. balance individual gun rights with the need to protect, public safety and prevent mass shootings?
I believe that, for reducing gun violence, I believe that the best way will be to reduce access, to the guns. And it's a layered approach. It's not going to be something overnight, but then again, you're going to combine background checks, permits, ensuring they have permits, safe storage, I talked about it earlier. And youth programs, advocacy, and enlightenment, community outreaches, just to let them know. And of course, mental health services. When the local, state, and federal leaders all work together collectively and the communities they govern stay engaged, I think that our neighborhoods can be safer, regardless of the laws enshrined in the Second Amendment of the Constitution. You also talked about balancing individual rights. I think we touched that earlier. Again, it's just about finding a balance, finding the right balance. There is no fix-it approach. This is something that is enshrined in the Constitution. So for even people to approach this, there are so many loopholes to back off because it's in the Constitution. But like I said, it's no longer the 18th century. Today's environment is totally different. The social environment is different. The firearms then are different now. So a lot has to go in. It's just not, there is no fixed approach to this.
Thank you so much, Joy, for your time on Arise America today. She is a global affairs analyst. We had to touch on gun violence in the United States.